This is a special report from ABC News Digital.
Hello everyone, I'm Dan Kleffler in New York with this ABC News Digital special report. We are learning more today about the terrorist attack on that mall in Nairobi, Kenya that left more than 6 people dead. A top government official is claiming that Kenyan troops caused 3 floors of that mall to collapse while battling the hostage takers, members of the Somali extremist group Al-Shabaab. And I want to bring in Alex Marquardt now from Nairobi with the latest on this developments. Alex, what do we know about the investigation?
Well, the investigation is very much ongoing. Over the course of the week, international investigators from all over the world, including the U.S., Britain, Israel, have come in to help the Kenyan authorities comb through the rubble, most notably from that collapse that you were talking about, to try and figure out how the attack took place, what exactly happened, and perhaps most importantly, get to the bottom of who exactly carried out this attack. And the Kenyan authorities have said that several of the attackers' bodies are in that rubble, and so they're hoping that with the international help, those bodies will provide clues as to who carried out the attack.
Do we have any clear picture of the kind of weapons that were used inside this attack?
Absolutely. Well, certainly on the attackers' side, we know that they used AK-47s. American officials have said that there were homemade IEDs, improvised explosive devices. We know that grenades were used. When the Kenyan authorities went in, they also used small arms. We know that they used tear gas. And of course, there's the report that you were referring to about rocket-propelled grenades. And so there's a theory now that perhaps it was the weapons from the military side that might have caused those 3 stories to collapse. That was an anonymous government official who was talking about that. And when the Interior Minister was asked about it at a press conference today, he didn't have any comment.
What about Kenyan officials putting out a report that there have the death toll at 67, but we're also hearing obviously that there are bodies that are still buried in the rubble there. Any idea about the number of those still listed as missing?
Well, that death toll hasn't really moved over the last few days. We know that it's 61 civilians, 6 security officers, and then there were 5 attackers. But at the same time, one of the major questions is there are 59 people who are still said to be missing. That's according to the Kenyan Red Cross. So where are those people? Are they still inside the mall? Were they not at the mall at all? So there is a chance that death toll is going to go up. As far as the bodies that are in the rubble, the Kenyan authorities say that the vast majority are believed to be attackers' bodies, that there will be what they called an insignificant number of Kenyan civilians and shoppers who are in that rubble. So right now it stands at 67, but there is a possibility that it will go up because of that huge number of people still missing.
And what do we know about those that are in custody right now of the Kenyan authorities?
Initially, they said there were 11 people in custody who had been arrested. Today, the Interior Minister told us at a press conference that 3 had been interrogated and released. There are still 8 in custody. I asked him point blank what the identities and the nationalities are of these attackers. He wouldn't tell us. So we're hoping that in the coming days we'll get a little bit more information about who they're holding. But right now, they're really not saying anything. And that's part of the problem, is there's a growing amount of frustration here in Kenya among Kenyans about the lack of transparency coming from the Kenyan government, the lack of answers to these massive questions. It's a growing as the country tries to move on with its, move on and live normally.
In those initial reports, in those initial first couple of hours and the first day or two of the attack, a lot of the communication that we were seeing was coming off on social media, from Twitter, both from the attackers and from the Kenyan government as well. So to that point that you were making there, as far as how information is being released into the public, certainly something that everyone's going to be keeping an eye on. What about, though, as far as the search for anyone else that might have been involved, either inside Kenya or internationally?
Well, the Interior Minister again today was saying that they have bolstered security all around the country's borders. We know that they've also done the same at Nairobi's airport, which is the main international airport. So that's not only to prevent more militants coming in from Somalia, where we suppose many of them came from, because that's where Al-Shabaab is based, but also to prevent, to essentially put down a net and stop others from leaving. But again, this is a question that the Kenyans really haven't really answered. They haven't said how they're going about trying to find people. There was a question today at the press conference whether they thought they had everyone, and then they didn't answer it. So it's one of the big questions that's still out there.
What is the motive then for al-Shabaab? What did they hope to accomplish from something like this?
Well, the head of al-Shabaab is a man named Godain, and he's come out and said that essentially it's because of a Kenyan troop presence in Somalia. There are believed to be around 4,000 Kenyan troops in Somalia as part of an African Union peacekeeping force. Al-Shabaab has been actively trying to turn Somalia into an Islamic state, and essentially at one point they controlled a huge part of the country, although that's been on the wane lately. So the stated reason for carrying out this attack was Kenyan presence in Somalia.
As this has turned into an international effort, what do we know is the role of the FBI?
Well, the FBI is one of a number of groups who are assisting the Kenyan authorities in trying to reconstruct this attack, figure out how it happened, and most importantly, figure out who carried it out. The Israelis are also here. The Brits are also here, various European countries. So they're really bringing in experts from all around the world to help piece this back together. We haven't been given an exact time frame as to when we might be able to expect results from this investigation. The Interior Minister today told people that it's a delicate operation. He didn't want to give much information because there's still a lot of unanswered questions that hopefully these investigators, the FBI and the others, will be able to answer as they keep combing through that mall, which really much lays in ruins now.
And lastly, before we let you go, Alex, I wanted to ask you specifically about a British woman, Samantha Lewthwaite. She is known as the White Widow. Interpol issued an arrest for her yesterday, and that was coming from a request from Kenya. What do we know about her? What is her potential connection to this attack?
Well, it's a really fascinating study. It's a fascinating individual. I mean, she is a British woman in her late 20s. She was married to one of the men who carried out the 7/7 bombings in London in 2005, and she's believed to have links to al-Shabaab. Now, Interpol put out what they call a red notice yesterday, acting, they said, on a request from the Kenyans to put this out. But the stated reason was for charges dating back to December 2011. There was no mention of the Westgate attack. Of course, that's remarkable timing because there had been reports that there were women among the attackers, specifically a white woman that could have been Lewthwaite. But then I asked the Interior Minister today what her connection might be, and his spokesman told me that right now there is no established connection. That essentially the red notice that was put out yesterday by Interpol was done as for what they called a precautionary measure.
All right. ABC's Alex Marquardt in Kenya. Alex, thank you for that. We appreciate it. We have a complete report on abcnews.com. For now, I'm Dan Kleffler in New York with this ABC News Digital Special Report.
This has been a special report from ABC News Digital.